Hello Year 10, this is Mr. Azapadi. I'm making you a video to do some revision about arguments for and against the existence of God. So yeah, we're kind of finished one section of the belief in God unit. So rather than moving on at this stage to the next part of the belief in God unit, we're just going to do a bit of revision on the arguments so far that we've looked at. And mainly that's what we've looked at so far, the arguments for and against believing in God. This is the worksheet that you're going to use. It'd be great if you could print off a copy of this worksheet and write on the sheet. So this is the first part of the sheet, which all you're going to do, it says, these are arguments for believing in God. You're going to explain how each name, quote, or key term is linked to the argument. So all you're going to do is explain it in the boxes there, and I'm going to talk you through those things in this video. This is the second part. This is the argument against the existence of God that we've looked at, which is the problem of evil. So again, you're going to explain the problem of evil, and then you're going to explain the Theodicies. Those are the responses to the problem of evil. Okay, let's start then. So this is the arguments for the existence of God. So it starts with William Paley. What did William Paley say? Well, he said this: we know a watch is designed because it's complex and has a purpose. Then he says some things in the world, like natural things in the world, like the eye, are also complex and have a purpose. Therefore, there must have been someone who designed them, and he thinks that person must have been God. So that is the basics of William Paley's teleological argument, or sometimes it's called the design argument. Charles Darwin is our biggest person to argue against William Paley. What does he say? He says things like the eye were not designed. They came about through random genetic mutations. The mutations that were most useful were passed on. This is called evolution by natural selection. So nice and straightforward, for and against the teleological argument. Okay, then we've got a quote from the Bible. It says, God made the wild animals according to their kind, the livestock according to their kind, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. What's this got to do with the teleological argument? Well, it can be used to back up William Paley. For Christians who believe everything in the Bible is literally true, they would believe that this must be how the world was created. And why does it back up Paley? Well, it specifically says that evolution cannot have happened. Why does it say that? Because it says that God made animals according to their kinds. In other words, God made animals in the form that they now exist. So in other words, you know, if we're saying he made the wild animals according to their kinds, that would mean he made lions as lions and tigers as tigers and so on and so on and so on. Which is against evolution, because evolution says that animals evolved from different kinds of animals before them. So this quote goes against evolution and therefore goes against the idea that everything in the world evolved into the way it is today, and therefore could be used by some Christians to support the idea that no, human beings were designed by God. The anthropic principle is probably a better response philosophically to Darwin, because the anthropic principle says actually, yes, maybe the eye and things like the eye can be explained through evolution. So if people who use the anthropic principle would say, yes, that doesn't, the eye does not prove the existence of God, but they would say there are other things about the universe which do prove God's existence. So they say we live in a universe that is set up to allow our existence. If the universe were any other way, life would not exist. For example, if the force of gravity in the universe was slightly stronger, there could be no life. Okay, next argument is the moral argument. Moral argument is the last one we looked at. So the first one, John Henry Newman says, we feel responsible, are ashamed, are frightened at transgressing the voice of conscience. This implies there is one to whom we're responsible. So he said, what he means is everyone has a conscience and they feel guilty when they go against it. Therefore, there must be a God who gives us our conscience. You might want to add in there, John Henry Newman also said that he thought everybody had quite a similar conscience, but most people have similar ideas about right and wrong. So that's his moral argument. It's backed up by the Bible. St. Paul in the Bible says that even people who've never heard of the Ten Commandments know what is right and wrong because, here's the quote, what the law requires is written on their hearts. So the Bible agrees that God has given people a conscience. The Bible agrees that that's where the conscience comes from. Sigmund Freud disagreed. He said our conscience comes from internalizing the teachings we are given as we grow up, from our parents, from other people in society. It is not from God. So he says we can explain why we have a conscience purely by the fact that we've been raised and taught about what's right and wrong, and as we grow up we internalize those ideas. Immanuel Kant has a different kind of moral argument. His idea was, if ethics is going to make sense, if doing the right thing makes sense, good people must be rewarded for their actions. But we know that sometimes good people have an unhappy life. Therefore, there must be an afterlife where they can be rewarded. His belief is that, and therefore he would say that there must be a God who created that afterlife. There we go. That's the moral argument. Okay, cosmological is next. We did this one first, actually. We're going in kind of a strange order here. So the cosmological, we'll start with Thomas Aquinas, says there is no case known in which a thing is found to be the efficient cause of itself. So he's saying nothing causes itself. Therefore, everything has a cause. So the universe must have a cause. If everything has a cause, the universe must have a cause, and that must be God. The evidence you've got there is of redshift. This is the evidence for the Big Bang theory. So red light from distant galaxies show the universe is expanding. The fact that the light we see from distant galaxies is red. This means it started from a single point and expanded. This means there must be have been a Big Bang, and therefore the Big Bang began the universe and not God. Of course, you could respond to that by saying, well, what created the Big Bang? Here's a quote from the Bible. I don't think we looked at this quote. This is the very first quote in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Therefore, the Bible supports Aquinas. Literalists would believe this rather than the scientific evidence. Literalists of the Bible would say, look, it doesn't matter about redshift. They don't trust scientific evidence. They'd say, look, the Bible says God started the world, so it did. Of course, you can't use the Bible, quote, as proof that God exists because people only believe in the Bible because they think it's from God. So that would be a circular argument to use the Bible to prove God's existence. However, you could use that quote to criticize the argument from the Big Bang theory. You could say, well, literalists wouldn't accept the scientific evidence in the Big Bang because they follow the Bible. Lastly, Sam Harris says the notion of a creator poses an instant problem of infinite regress. If God created the universe, what created God? Infinite regress is when you just go back and back and back and back. So he's kind of saying, if God created the universe, if you're saying the universe must have a cause, and that cause is God, well, what caused God? And then what caused the thing that caused God? And then what caused the thing that caused the thing that caused God? And then what caused the thing that caused the thing that caused the thing that caused whatever, God, all the way down. So he's saying you haven't actually solved the problem if you say God is the cause, because if you're saying everything has a cause, then you need to find a cause for God. Interesting argument. So that's a criticism of the cosmological argument. Okay, let's look at the problem of evil. Here's the inconsistent triad. An inconsistent triad just means three things that cannot all be true. Evil exists, we know that's true. God is omnipotent, all-powerful, we know Christians think that. God is omnibenevolent, all-loving, we know that Christians think that. The idea is, and it's J.L. Mackie was the person who came up with this idea, the idea is that these three things cannot all be true at the same time, because if God is all-powerful, he should be able to stop evil. If he is all-loving, he should want to stop evil. But evil still exists, so there is a problem. That is the inconsistent triad. Now, Christian Theodicies are attempts to solve the problem of evil. In other words, attempts to explain why evil exists when there is an all-loving and all-powerful God. Let's have a look at those now. St. Augustine said, evil has no positive nature, but the loss of good has received the name evil. So what does he mean? Well, he means God created a world with no evil in it. Then he wants to say evil is not a thing that God made. He didn't make an evil, but it's just what happens when his creation does not live up to what God made it to be. So God made the world intending it to be perfect. If that world does not live up to God's expectations or what God created it for, that's what we call evil. So evil came into the world through the sin of Adam and Eve. They ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden when God told them not to, and that created evil. Moral evil is explained by the fact that since this sin, humans have used their free will to go against God. So Adam and Eve kind of opened the floodgates to human sin. Since then, everyone has turned against God in that way. Natural evil is seen as a punishment for the sin of Adam and Eve. So we are suffering because of their sins. Now, I asked for a criticism on there. You can come up with your own criticisms, but the points you should be thinking about there are: one, the theory of evolution might question whether Adam and Eve were real people. So if they weren't real people, then how can we be paying for their sins? Secondly, even if they were real people, there's a problem here. Why are we suffering for what Adam and Eve did wrong? We weren't the people who did this wrong. It seems unfair to punish humanity nowadays for the things that someone else did wrong. Okay, next one, St. Irenaeus. Now the quote here comes from John Hick, not from Irenaeus himself, because John Hick's quote is an easier one to explain and understand. The quote is, "In a world devoid of dangers to be avoided, we may assume that there would have been virtually no moral development." So what's he saying, Irenaeus? Evil is put into the world by God because it's good for us. Natural evil. These things help us to develop good qualities like bravery, patience, and compassion. Without natural evils to struggle against, we could not grow as people. Moral evil. Well, this is the product of free will. God gives us free will. He doesn't want us to be like robots. He wants us to be able to make our own choices in life. Because if the whole point of life is to grow and become better people, you can only grow if you can make choices and decide to grow as a person. However, because God has given us this free will, obviously some people are going to use that free will in the wrong way. So that moral evil is a result of that. Okay, last one, the book of Job. Job, in the story, if you remember, is someone who is very loyal to God, and then lots of evil things happen to him. Basically, terrible things happen to him, like he loses his family, his wealth. Eventually, he's given this really serious disease where he's suffering all the time. When Job asks God why he allowed him to suffer, God appears before him and gives a long speech, which includes these words: "Where were you when I made the earth? If you are so smart, answer me." That's what he said. What's this supposed to be getting towards? Well, the theodicy here is that God is transcendent. His actions and decisions are beyond our understanding. So we can't understand what God does. God must have reasons for allowing suffering, but we can never understand what they are. So this just asks us to accept God allows suffering. He must have a reason because he's all loving and all powerful. But because he's transcendent, he's a being beyond our understanding, we cannot understand why it is that we had to suffer. The criticism to this is usually people put, it just simply doesn't really answer the question. It just says, we can't tell you the answer. I think the book of Job, logically, is quite a satisfying answer to the question because it makes perfect sense. But on an emotional level, it perhaps is not satisfactory because it doesn't really provide a good answer to the question.